When it comes to auto manufacturers, Ford is one of the kings here in the United States. Their F-150 is usually one of the, if not the, top-selling vehicle here in the Freedom States. Ford has also graced us with some fast pony cars, but then kind of decided that making cars wasn't really their thing or the move. We'll talk about that later. But I've owned a few Fords, so I have an opinion here. Let's dive in today and look at the good, bad, and ugly of Ford. When it comes to the car scene here in the United States, it's hard to show up to a show or a track day without there being some sort of Ford Mustang there. The Mustang has been in production with the folks, the Blue Oval, since 1964 without any break in these little horsies rolling off the assembly line. Yeah, there were a few years in the mid to late 70s that were kind of weird and less desirable, but Ford kept things moving with the Mustang. The Mustang brought and continues to bring a fun, reliable, and good-looking sports coupe to the masses. The introduction and continuation of the Mustang also means that other car manufacturers needed to step up to the plate and produce something to compete with the Mustang. That's where the likes of the Camaro were born. Since then, the Mustang was one of the cars for manufacturers to compare their sports coupes to. I owned a 2005 Mustang GT, and out of all the cars I've owned, that one got the most attention. Not because it had some crazy mods done to it or some crazy power, but it's because people genuinely connect to the Ford Mustang. Most people have had a friend or family member that owned one, and it's a very nostalgic thing for them to go through. The current generation Mustang is also one that more of the world got because Ford made some changes to make it a global car. And we know that is the S550 chassis code. This car can be tuned and modified to a huge extent with a plethora of aftermarket support, whether you want to be a stance boy or take your car to the drag strip and lay down some quick passes. Heck, this Mustang can even handle thanks to its independent rear suspension. These things even drift great, and I think will become more and more popular in that scene. Up next in the good section are two sibling cars, the Ford Focus and the Ford Fiesta. Both of these cars are economical and fun to drive. You might hate this, but in the boring trim levels, I still enjoy driving them when I get a Focus or a Fiesta as a rental car when I used to travel a lot. But what I really want to mention on the good list here is the ST trim level of the Focus and Fiesta. The ST trim level takes the naturally fun nature of the Focus and Fiesta and turns it up a few notches with more power and handling. These are very popular enthusiast vehicles, and prices on them have been rising steadily since Americans actually aren't able to buy them anymore since Ford discontinued them in 2018. We can't talk about the Ford Focus though without mentioning the Focus RS. This is the Ford Focus to get and takes everything cool about the ST trim level and turns it up like 5 more notches. I don't know what notch we're on, but this is a freaking awesome Ford. So this is a Focus with all-wheel drive and enough power and handling to turn you into Colin McRae. Fun fact, he drove a Focus and I fell in love with the Ford Focus after playing a shit ton of Colin McRae Rally 2005, so I'm ancient. Before I list the next performance car here in the good section, I want to list a Ford that is near and dear to our hearts here at Fitment Industries. That, my friends, is the Ford Crown Victoria. This thing and the Panther platform it's based on have been around for a freaking ever. The Crown Victoria was around from 1992 until 2012. This is a freaking solid car that's comfortable and has enough power to have fun in. If you can pick a used one up from police auction, I would highly encourage it because the one we bought has touched all of our hearts. They also do really good burnouts with like 0 effort. It's seriously insane. Back to fast cars though in the good section. I want to mention the Taurus SHO, or I'm gonna say SHO. The SHO stands for super high output and makes this family sedan a complete sleeper that will show you its taillights from a dig before you even realize what it was. The first and second gen had Yamaha do a little work under the hood, and it came out with a 7,000 RPM redline with a freaking manual transmission. The third generation still had the Yamaha collab but dropped the crazy bodywork and manual transmission, but the last generation is like a baby GTR with a twin turbo V6 and all-wheel drive. A little tuning makes these things crazy fast. We can't talk about the good parts of Ford without mentioning 3 very important letters to the company. Those are SVT. The Ford Special Vehicle Team is responsible for any car enthusiast vehicles coming from the company. Here's some highlights, in my opinion, that haven't been mentioned on the list so far coming from that team. Raptor, Cobra, Lightning, and the Ford GT. Any vehicle that has been graced by the SVT team, that was redundant, has delivered on the team's core values of performance, substance, exclusivity, and value. Lastly, in the good section, let's talk about Ford Motor Company's motors because they've made some very good ones. V8s are the company's bread and butter, and they have been for a long time. The Ford 5.0 or 5.0 as I'm going to call it, the legendary motor, either the old 5.0 or the one they have currently in production. Ford's 4.6 liter and 5.4 liter motors have also been put in a ton of cars, especially the 4.6 liter. There are some variants of these motors, but they're considered a modular V8 within Ford's lineup. I've had 2 4.6 liter Fords and for the most part like them. I also had a truck with a 351 Windsor and have nothing but amazing things to say about that, except the gas mileage was terrible. Moving away from the good of Ford, let's move into the bad section. We just talked about their V8s being good, but I have to mention two key issues. First, in the 4.6 liter V8s, the OEM spark plugs like to separate inside the head when you're taking them out. I was lucky when I did the plugs in my Mustang, I didn't have this happen. Secondly, on some 4.6 liter and 5.4 liter V8s, if you aren't on top of actually changing those spark plugs out, instead of getting stuck inside the head, the plugs like to become little astronauts and shoot themselves out, taking the threads with them. I had this happen on my F-150 and it sucked. You might also be sitting there thinking, if these Ford motors are so good, why aren't they swapped into more cars? Unfortunately, the lineup Ford has is a little wider than their LS brethren, so they don't fit as well, which is a drawback since you aren't being swapped into a lot of things. If you've watched my other videos in this series talking about Japanese manufacturers, you'll see me throw the cars we didn't get here in the United States into the bad section because it just plain sucks and we're greedy Americans and I honestly just wish we would have got those cars. Good thing, since Ford is a US-based company, that this isn't true. We got everything they made, right? Wrong, bitch. We got some issues with Ford. First of all, is the Ford Escort RS Cosworth, and that Mercer bullshit we got isn't the same at all. This is like the USDM STI that wasn't actually USDM because we just didn't get it. Super cool rally car style that y'all got in Europe to enjoy and we didn't. Oh yeah, and then one of my personal dream cars would be the Ford Escort RS 2000 Mark I. And this came out when emissions regulations in the States prevented us from having cool stuff, but they are really cool cars. Maybe we can go full Mad Max and talk about the Ford Falcon that we didn't get as well, especially the latest one, which was a very cool four-door that could drive your kids to the drag strip in, beat an R32 GTR with your kids in the back seat, and then drive home. I'm salty about this because I do love Ford, and the Fords we didn't get are the style of cars I really enjoy. That's done with the rant. Remember how I mentioned that part of Ford's SVT values are exclusivity? Well, they took that exclusivity to a new level with the latest generation of the Ford GT. In the bad section, we have to talk about how Ford had new owners of the Ford GT sign a contract stating that they would not sell the cars within the first 2 years of ownership. That sounds super crazy, especially in a free market that wouldn't hold up well in court. Turns out it doesn't hold up well. The most famous case of someone pissing off Ford doing this would be when John Cena sold his Ford GT after a few weeks of ownership. Who messes with John Cena? Next on the bad list is the issue with the Shelby versions of the Mustang around 2015 having some oil leaks. The main issues were oil cooler leaks and improperly torqued oil filters coming loose. The oil filter issue was famously documented by Adam LZ when his car caught fire. As much as this leaky situation sucks, Ford did try to do whatever they could to make it right, and going through the forums there, and there's some well-documented fixes. Next on the bad list is a crowd pleaser. Well, actually it's more of like a crowd killer. I'm a marketing guy, and the whole meme of Mustangs being crowd killers was not a great look for Ford and the Mustang. There wasn't anything inherently bad about the cars or something wrong. There were just a lot of documented on-video incidents of Mustang owners getting a little loose and spinning out, hitting something or someone, and just making themselves look like fools. I like to throw this sort of thing into the bad section because it affects a company's image and people's perception of a brand. And you know what, folks? Perception is reality. I'd also like to put Ford's reintroduction of Thunderbird on the bad section as well. The revival of Thunderbird happened in 2002 and only lasted until 2005. That's because the car was really expensive for what it was. Didn't have any crazy luxury features for that price, and it wasn't a performance car to make up for the lack of creature comforts. The exterior style on the Thunderbird was really good. It looked excellent, and at that time nailed the modern retro image a lot of things were going through. The interior and rest of the car was a bit of a parts bin effort by Ford, with things pulled from various models into the Thunderbird, making it feel less special. We're through the bad stuff, but now it gets worse. Let's look at the uggo parts of Ford. First up in the ugly section for us car lovers is the fact that Ford stopped making frickin' cars outside of the Mustang. As of filming this, if you go to the Ford website here in the USA and go to the cars section, it's literally just the Mustang in 2022. That's like the only thing in there. We lost the Focus and Fiesta along with the Taurus, which were all listed in the good section here in the USA. The rest of the world still gets some car treatment, but not us here in the States. Honestly, it's kind of our fault as consumers though. We kept buying trucks, SUVs, and crossovers instead of new cars that are being produced. Ford just didn't see the money in keeping these cars going when other vehicles are much more profitable to make. I think there's an argument to be made that Ford could have put an effort forth to make the cars more interesting and attract more consumers to buy, but that's risky when they already have something that sells like hotcakes. It sucks, and I don't think we're gonna see a new Ford car announced with a gasoline engine. The next lineup will probably be electric. The last two items I have on the ugly list are more PR nightmares Ford had to deal with, but are absolutely ugly times in the company's history. First, we gotta talk about the whole Explorer rollover debacle. I won't go through the whole issue here since that could be a whole video on its own, and honestly, if you wanna hear more about that sort of stuff, let us know. Leave a comment down below and subscribe, all those things. We wanna know what you guys wanna see. Anyways, Ford Explorers are rolling over at an alarming rate. Ford blamed their tire supplier, Firestone, for the issue since Explorers, the Firestones, were rolling over at a faster and more alarming rate than those compared with Goodyear tires. Firestone, of course, blamed Ford and the design of the Explorer, along with Ford's recommended tire pressure being a low 26 PSI versus what Firestone thought it should be at 30 PSI. In the end, both companies lost a lot of money and looked kind of silly in the process since this whole debate caught the public's attention. There was so much attention because people were unfortunately getting hurt and losing their lives. Not good and an ugly part of Ford's history. Lastly, in the ugly section, we gotta talk about the Ford Pinto and its exploding gas tank. My parents actually owned a Pinto, so luckily they didn't get into a rear end collision or I probably wouldn't be here right now. The Pinto's gas tank had a design flaw which allowed the fuel to combust when hit from the rear. Ford actually knew this could be a problem, but figured it could be cheaper for the company to pay for the injuries and deaths that could happen instead of fixing the issue itself. So not only was this an issue because people were getting hurt in a specific model of car, causing sales to drop, but Ford also knew this and looked past it. This happened back in the 70s, so a lot of you might not even know about this or just think it's a funny thing from long ago. It's not. It was a real thing that a company went through, and it's kind of shitty to look back on it and know that they saw it as a problem and didn't actually address it. I read all of your comments in these videos, and I know that I'll miss a few things here or there, and I didn't go super in depth on something. Please leave a comment below on something that you think should be included as part of Ford's good, bad, or ugly, and what section it should go in. I can tell you right now that I didn't talk about the Bronco, the Mach-E, or the EcoBoost motors, since I kind of want to see where these go in the next year or so, because they're kind of either very new or people are just tapping into the potential. Also, for you that are out there and hey, you didn't mention this or it's not in the video, here's a list of every Ford vehicle ever made, so you can't say that I missed it in the video. Anyways, I appreciate you guys watching. I'm Sam. Peace.